How's it going, everybody? It's No Pro Jim back with the Snapmaker. Today we're going to be going over how to break down the 3D printing selection portion of this and switching it over to the laser cutting capabilities. However, before that, we're going to go over setting up the enclosure for the Snapmaker. Now, there's different reasons why you're going to want this enclosure and why you'd want to keep it. Personally, one of the reasons why I want it is to be able to keep the mess isolated into the enclosure and also keep things from getting onto the machine from outside the enclosure. I believe this is going to help keep things a little tidier in my shop, as well as make it easier to maintain the equipment itself. Not only do I believe the enclosure is good for containing the mess itself, but also keeping contained some of those harmful particles and fumes that come from using the machine and the materials you use with it. You can see simply picking up the power source and carefully setting it on the plate, grabbing a good position around the Snapmaker. It is not too hard to just lift up and move around where you want to move it. You'll see the Snapmaker is very easy to move around when you need to clean up your shop or maybe move it from location to location. Before we get started, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can receive notifications about upcoming videos I have. And don't be afraid to leave comments down below and help this channel grow by sharing the video. By giving me a thumbs up or thumbs down, that lets me know how I'm doing on the video and helps me to improve where I need to improve. Now let's go ahead and jump back into this. So here it is, the Snapmaker Enclosure. We're going to go ahead, open this bad boy up and take a look what we got inside. Go ahead, open this up, take a look. Basically the same setup as the original box for the Snapmaker. Right on top we have some foam and we have the manual right here. We know we're going to be needing this. After that you're going to see 3 boxes which consist of the 48-inch beams, 24-inch beams, the exhaust duct and clamps. We also have some tools and accessories. Looks like we have the front folding doors as well as the side folding door. Looks like we have the rear panel, the top and side panel. First thing you want to do is open up to page 2 of the manual. Go ahead and check out the parts list. Go ahead and get them all set out and make sure that you have everything. Now I've already gone through everything. I already know everything's here. The next step is going to be to unbox the rest of the items. One thing they make clear in the manual is that when handling the acrylic boards and the beams and putting this together, that you be careful and look out for any sharp edges so you don't hurt yourself. On a side note, each one of the beams have the name of the part engraved on the side of it. Make sure while you're staging it that you go ahead and face all those up so you know and see what parts you're working with. While framing the bottom part of the enclosure, use the beams titled 1. You're going to want to use the M4x28 short head screws. Like this. And then screw into those holes right there. For the 24-inch beam, you're going to want the embossed lettering inward and facing up. And for the 48-inch beam, you're going to see these 2 little grooves that you want actually on the bottom facing inward. Get it into position. There are sharp edges on these beams, so make sure while you're threading in these screws that you're carefully screwing them in and use the tools so you don't end up cutting your finger. Alright, at this point we got the bottom frame screwed together. So while looking down at the frame, look at the boss numbers on the 24-inch, look for the 1, and then locate the 2 screws that are in close proximity together about this far apart. That's where we're going to take the touchscreen holder and we're going to screw it in. We'll be switching over to the M4 by 20 hex socket head screws. Go ahead and move on to the next direction. Next, we'll be attaching 3 of these 24-inch beams to the corner of the frame. We'll be looking for the parts that are titled 2. And the 4th beam you'll need will have this black piece on it. This part will be titled 3. When attaching these pieces, we're going to switch back to the short head screws, which have a thinner head. We're going to need 8 of these. The first beam part we're going to use title 3. We're going to go ahead and put over here by the touchscreen holder. We're going to make sure that the wire is protruding upwards and that this is facing inboard towards the center of the frame. One thing I did want to point out while putting this frame together, kind of like the same thing when putting the Snapmaker together, is the pieces, when you're dealing with them, actually feel very high quality. Nothing feels flimsy or cheaply produced, and that's a good thing. Let's go ahead and start piecing together the frame for the top portion of the enclosure. Take the 24-inch beam with the embossed lettering right here, facing up and facing outward. Place it like this. We're going to make sure that the 48-inch beams with the port for the LED lighting power will go right over here, and we'll go ahead and start screwing those in. Next, you'll take the 24-inch beams with the cable port. We'll place this with the cable port inboard facing up. And there we go, we got the top portion of the frame done. Go ahead and put the bottom portion down. With the orientation of the bottom of the frame having the touchscreen bracket over here, we're going to go ahead and take the top portion of the frame with the cable ports and have it come down with the LED lightings facing down and the port to the rear. So there we have it, completely framed off, nice and sturdy. Next we'll be attaching the acrylic rear board. Next we'll need the exhaust fan and the exhaust duct. We'll be placing the exhaust fan on the inside of the enclosure, while the exhaust duct is going to be placed on the outside right here. While looking at the exhaust fan, you'll see that the wires run through a groove right here. This is the face that's going to be up against the acrylic board. We're going to need the M4 wing nuts and the screws that come with it in the same baggage. Just get it tightened enough, not too tight, but where it's nice and snug, and you could position this and it'll somewhat stay where you leave it. Using the Allen wrench on the other side where the duct is, we'll go ahead and keep the screws in place. We tighten up these wing nuts. Watch the wire so you don't yank it. So this acrylic board is going to sit flush with the bottom surface, and it's going to come flush with the top of the frame. One thing to note that I forgot to do before putting on the acrylic board is the acrylic boards have a film to protect them. If you go ahead and take those off before you screw in, you shouldn't have any problems. I'm going to go ahead, peel them off with the screws already intact, and then clean up around the screws. Okay guys, so once we get this acrylic wall put up, we're going to be plugging in some wires. We have the wire from this fan, and adjacent from here across to that beam, we have a long wire that we're going to be running through the grooves and plug into this source right here. We also have the LED strips and these plugs. We're going to take 16 of these cable clips and line them up to where we could hold the wire in place. We'll be taking these grooves right here and clipping it, snapping it into place with these grooves right here, as such. So we'll go ahead, we'll tuck in a portion of the wire and we'll hold it in there. We'll attach the wire to the LED lights and we'll run it through the grooves and then clip them in and then attach it to the power source over here. Then you'll see we did the same thing with the fan. We'll take the wires, ran it up through the groove, over to the power source. Same with the LED light. Same groove to the power source, use the clips. Then the large wire coming from this piece right here, we also ran it up over. The next step in the process is taking the enclosure, picking it up and placing it over the Snapmaker and then fastening the feet down. However, before getting started with that, I suggest unplugging the power cord and then also unplugging the power source from the Snapmaker itself, because we're going to have to take that wire and thread it through on the back over the duct and through a little hole that they have pre-made. If you recall earlier in the video, I mentioned in these bottom beams that there's grooves down here. These grooves should line up perfectly with the feet of the Snapmaker. So go ahead and line it up the best that you can, trying to line those grooves on each side with these beams to the Snapmaker's footings where those little circular foot pads are. Now we're going to screw in these 4 pieces to the frame, securing it to the Snapmaker. The foot's about right here for the Snapmaker, and the groove is right here. We're going to go ahead and take this piece. We're going to go ahead and try to slide this in here. You might have to go ahead and lift up a corner of your Snapmaker. Yep. And then further align it a little bit better. It looks like we're a little off. There we go, and we got it. Now let's go ahead and get the rest of the pieces done. It's important to note that your power source is to be stationed on the outside of the enclosure. Since we went ahead and unplugged it, we'll go ahead and take this plug and we'll run it through the back into the enclosure through this little hole above the duct and fan. Once you get it through, go ahead and plug it back into the Snapmaker in the slot that says power. Next, we'll be taking this cord that came with the enclosure and we'll be plugging it into the enclosure up here in this black box. Now there's 2 areas you could plug it into. Go ahead and take it to the closest end, which is over here on the left side or right side if you're facing it. Once you plug it in here, you'll go ahead and come down here to the slot that says add-on 3. Go ahead and plug that in. Alright, so the next step we're going to be taking is attaching the side folding doors. Be careful when handling these and make sure not to place anything heavy on these. These are made out of acrylic and we don't want them to break. Also, you'll see that there's this blue film on them, so we'll go ahead and open this up and take all the film off of them before we start installing. Next part you're going to want to do is you're going to look on these frames and try to find the one that has 2 holes. They'll have 2 holes on the top and then 2 holes on the bottom as well. We'll be attaching these black little brackets by using the M3 screws. Also, you'll see there's this foam that's lining the inside of the folding doors. This is going to be the side that's going toward the enclosure. There we go, we have those pieces attached. Let's go ahead and see if we can attach the door to the enclosure now. So this right here is the little piece that we just attached. When you look at the enclosure, you should be looking for this notch right here. We're gonna go ahead, the first part that we do is attach this piece, slide it in here, and then slide it down here. Now that we have those pieces seated in here, we're gonna wanna go ahead and slide the whole door system down until these holes match up with the holes here. We'll now be switching back to the M4x20 screw and the larger Allen wrench. With the door opening and shutting, it's a little stiff. You might want to put a little bit of grease or something in the slot before you do it. It doesn't come with any, but I'd recommend it, or at least try opening and closing it a few times. One thing I noticed with this folding door is that it doesn't slide as smooth as you want it to. You literally have to concentrate on how you're holding and positioning the door as you're sliding it. The only way I could explain it is trying to maintain flushness with this door across this whole seam right here. Now that we got the side folding doors done, it's going to be the same process, just on a smaller scale for the front folding doors. As long as you're making sure those little black pieces that are in the groove are nice and parallel, you should have no problem opening and closing the door. Maybe adding a little bit of support with your opposing hand will help guide it a little bit better. Once we got the side and front folding doors installed, we want to move on to the side panel. Being that both acrylic panels are the same size, you could identify which one is the side panel by looking in the corner and finding the one with the cut like this, as well as this hole in which we'll be putting this black fitting in. This is where you'll be feeding your filament through when you're 3D printing. Don't forget to take the film off of the acrylic board. Going back to attaching the acrylic board, you're going to want to switch over to the M412 round screws. Alright, so according to the manual, the next step would be placing the last acrylic board that we have on the top of the frame and screwing that down. We're going to skip that step and move on to attaching this ducting hose. What you'll do is you'll go ahead and take one end and you'll just slide it over that piece. Get it nice and firm. Maybe even take the Allen wrench and kind of help push it in there a little bit deeper. We'll grab this ring bracket that they have. Go ahead and back it out and open it up, and then we'll start tightening it back in there. Feeding it through and tightening it up. You want it nice and snug. Be careful when you're pushing this through and you're threading it. Once it gets far enough back, you don't want to slice your fingers, so use caution. The thing about this is you're going to want to make sure when you're using this that this is fed outdoors. Alright, so there it is. That's a Snapmaker and its enclosure. And keep in mind, I haven't put on this top acrylic board yet because I do intend on changing this 3D printer out to the laser cutter and engraver. And in order to do that, I got to get behind there into the screws. And just to be safe, I want to make sure that I could access them. I'm pretty sure you can access them by having the door opened up and then reaching in there. But, you know, I'd like to be comfortable while doing it. Sometimes I just make up words and throw it in there, even if it's not there. That's if I could get the words to come out of my mouth the right way. Alright guys, so there we have it. That's the unboxing and the tutorial for the enclosure for the Snapmaker. And this size is for the Alpha 350. This is the largest one the Snapmaker makes. I have no complaints. Like I said in the middle of the video, all the pieces and parts that I dealt with are good quality. I hadn't had any issues with them. The screws didn't strip easily. The wrenches didn't strip out. Everything I was provided in the kit to create this enclosure was top notch. And as far as getting everything going, initially when I started it up, I had a warning thing. All I had to do was power it down, make sure that all the cables were secure in the right locations. As soon as I powered it up, it was operating the way that it was supposed to. And you can see that the LED lighting provides enough light so you can see it. The acrylic boards in the windows themselves are made out of the same material and shade tint that these glasses are, so they'll protect your eyes. So I'm pretty sure you don't have to wear these while you're using the enclosure. If you're not using the enclosure and you're using the laser, you might want to put these on. Other than that, I think it's outstanding and I'm excited to get going on my next projects. Alright guys, so that does it for the enclosure. Now we can roll over into doing the laser cutting and engraving. Since the Snapmaker is already put together, I think the hard part's over. When it comes to switching over from the 3D printing capabilities to the laser and engraving, I think the only things that are really going to happen is changing the base plate and then the header itself. Alright guys, so all I think we really have to do is take this piece off right here and then get to unscrewing all these pieces. It may seem a little tedious, but it shouldn't take that long. And it's not going to be difficult at all to do. You just start by backing them all out. Oh, pick them all out. Before you just yank this off, make sure you unplug it first. Next, for the laser cutter and engraver, you're going to need these metal plates. They look identical, but by the hole alignments, you can tell that they're not. So go ahead, take a double look at the manual and make sure that you're lining them up the right way. I think the two metal plates that go in the middle are going to have the 2 slots right here and then the half slots right here. On the metal plates that have the 4 holes in them, you're going to see that the holes are closer to one side than the other. You want the side that's closer to the edge to be inboard. Next, I'll drop these screws in there and then we'll tighten them up. Alright, so now that they're all secure, let's get working on that header. Just like when we belt this thing, when we put 4 in, we're going to have to take 4 out. There's 2 down here, and then the 2 up here. Let's get at it. First thing we should do is go ahead and unplug this cable. Because we just unplugged that cable, the LED lights have turned off. Once we get it switched over and plug that cable back in, the LED lights will light back up. Make sure you have a good grip on this so you don't drop it when you're unthreading it. Alright, so here we go. We've detached the 3D printer head. Okay, so this is a Snapmaker laser head. Alright, we'll go ahead and plug this cable into the laser head. So that concludes the breakdown of the 3D printing capabilities and the setup of the laser capabilities. When it comes to the calibration and actually calibrating the laser head, I did run into some errors. So I will highlight that it's very important that you take the time to understand what it is the manual is saying when it comes down to the calibration. Follow the instructions to a T. One of the issues I had was uncertainty in whether I should be centering on the plate the light that's in a circle or the actual nozzle to the header itself. After doing some runs and making some errors, I was offset based off of the fact I tried to center it around the circle of the light on the plate. Realizing that, I then had to go back and recalibrate the laser head, in which I did so using the nozzle. Make sure to use the right material that came with the Snapmaker when calibrating the laser head. You'll want to make sure to center it the best that you can before running the bounding box. At the end of the calibration, if your test board looks like this, go back and start your recalibration again. This is way offset, and all your work that you do from that point forward will be offset as well. Okay, once it engraves these lines, it will ask you to select the finest line out of the lines so it knows to calibrate the machine to its best example. One of the things that worked best for me was using the manual move to work origin. Every time I did that, it would orientate itself right in the center of the plates. Another thing I did to have successful prints was to make sure that I measured the material I was using all around by width, height, and depth. I would then enter the Lubin software, select the laser option, 3-axis option. I would then enter in the parameters of the job I was doing, height and width. With an inaccurate calibration, you could end up with some botched jobs and your jobs off to the side and not centered the way that they should be. This is why measurements and using the grids on the Lubin software is important when you're setting up your print job. I was able to go from prints like this and this to prints like this, these, this, and this. Overall, I'm very satisfied with the production capabilities of the laser header, the laser cutter, and engraver. I haven't done any laser cutting yet, but I know that I will not be dissatisfied. As of now, as far as the Snapmaker goes, I'm completely satisfied. 2 out of the 3 capabilities so far, nailing it. Outstanding production, great quality work. So that's it for this tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button or dislike, and share with someone that's interested in the Snapmaker or any type of the productions that we've done this far. Thank you guys for hanging in there and watching this tutorial. I'm No Pro Jim, and I'm out. Peace.